Jeff, I want to dive right in on the insane news over the past 24 hours, this leaked draft of a Supreme Court decision, basically stating that the court will very likely, potentially, overturn Roe v. Wade. What was your reaction to this?
Gosh, it's hard to react, right? Because we don't know if it's official. So you have so many things going on at one time. You have this crazy leak that happened at the U.S. Supreme Court that we haven't seen happen in the modern era in a long time. And so you have that situation going on. You have the brokenness of trust that took place within the U.S. Supreme Court, the norms within the U.S. Supreme Court. What does that mean for the future? So you have all of those issues going on, in addition to the idea that we may see the fall of Roe v. Wade. If that's true, that's something to celebrate. We've been working for nearly 50 years within the pro-life community in order to achieve that. So that's something to celebrate. But then also, if you're in a place like Colorado, you recognize that it's going to get a lot worse in our states. So you have all these states that are going to essentially outlaw abortion: Texas, Mississippi, Florida, probably. You have Oklahoma. You have all these Midwest and Southern states that are going to essentially get rid of abortion. Well, then we're going to end up with travel abortion coming to places like Colorado and California. In Colorado, we had a donation come into the state of Colorado, $20 million from the ex-wife of Jeff Bezos to Rocky Mountain Planned Parenthood, the largest single donation in the history of the state to Planned Parenthood. So they're gearing up to basically flood our state with abortion, which is heartbreaking. So you have all these mixed emotions going on, all within essentially the last 18 hours, and we're all trying to figure out what to do. And we don't even know if this decision's real yet. So talk about a historic moment for our country.
Yeah, and we should emphasize that this is a draft opinion. It's from February. It looks like it's the first draft of an opinion. We have no idea. And just so people realize, as far as we know, justices can change their mind. And sometimes that even happens days before they actually reveal their final, verdict on a case. So there's a lot to unpack there. We have no idea. But let's talk about the hypothetical that this is true, that Roe v. Wade is going away. There are a lot of misconceptions surrounding this issue. Some of them are peddled on one side of the aisle, especially those on the pro-choice side, saying this means abortion is doomed as we know it. Abortion will be gone. It will no longer be happening. But you were just hinting to the fact that that may not be the case. Can you speak to that issue? What would happen tomorrow if Roe v. Wade were gone?
Yeah, great question. So what Roe v. Wade did was it created a line on which states could restrict abortion, and that line was viability. So prior to viability, prior to a child being able to live outside the womb, states couldn't interfere with that with their laws. After viability, then states could pass laws that restricted abortion. So you had restrictions on late-term abortion, you had restrictions on third trimester, even some second trimester abortions, because viability is changing, is getting earlier and earlier. So that's what Roe v. Wade did. With getting rid of Roe v. Wade, if it's overturned, it will allow states to come up with laws that restrict abortion at any point during the pregnancy, from the moment of conception all the way until prior to just before birth. And you're going to see a variety of laws. You'll see some states that say, we don't want abortion at all, so we're going to essentially ban all abortions from the moment of conception. Then you'll have states like Colorado that will say, we're willing to allow abortion at any moment, even up until birth. And then you have everything in between. So you have some third trimester restrictions on abortion. You may have restrictions on if a child has a Down syndrome. That's another law that's often pushed and being signed into law right now. So they're trying to protect individual classes of people based upon either disability or race or sex from having abortions explicitly placed upon them. So all of this is wide open. And that's essentially what's going to happen if Roe v. Wade falls. So now the movement, the pro-life movement, it really needs to go to each and every state. So in Colorado, just recently, the state legislature, which is dominated by pro-choice elected officials, decided to allow abortion up until birth with no restrictions whatsoever, and explicitly wrote into law that a preborn child has no rights in the state of Colorado. Okay, no rights whatsoever in the state of Colorado. So that's what we are living with in the state of Colorado right now. That was signed by our governor. And so if Roe falls, that's now, irregardless, that's our law in the state of Colorado. So pro-lifers across the country need to focus in on these particular states. And you're going to have states that really try to become pro-abortion, pro-death states. And so California will be one of those, New York, possibly New Jersey, Colorado, Oregon, Washington, some of the more liberal states. And so I want to encourage everybody, you need to think outside of your state. You need to think outside of the federal government and really help those of us that are pro-lifers in states like Colorado fight back against the abortion industry.
Well, and it doesn't mean, you mentioned states like Florida and Oklahoma and these other places where it may go on the other side where it's, illegal or very restricted. It doesn't mean that people aren't going to fight to make it legalized again, right? You have 50 different battles that will be going on in 50 different states. And you mentioned the tourism issue too, which is an unfortunate word to have to use while talking about abortion. But a lot of states like California and New York becoming sort of these hubs, in Colorado where people are going to be going. If it's not offered in their state, they're going to be going there. And so that kind of brings me to this other place. And you know this because I've heard these critiques a lot. I'm sure you have. A lot of people on the left will say, well, you pro-lifers, all you care about is being pro-birth. You don't do anything to help, babies who are born and all of that. I'd love to get a response from you on that, but also at the same time, a responsibility on behalf of the movement, the pro-life movement, moving forward when it comes to maybe filling in those gaps a little bit more. I would love to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, that's a great question. So for the last few decades, the pro-life community has really led the effort to care for moms and dads facing a crisis pregnancy. So we created crisis pregnancy centers as alternatives to Planned Parenthood. So you're not just going to walk into an abortion mill where you're really pushed to get an abortion with the hopes that you'll leave and then come back for your next abortion and you become a regular customer to an abortion mill. So that we created crisis pregnancy centers to help moms understand all the different alternatives that they have to adoption, to financial support they can receive from ministries. And there's a lot of ministries out there. So in the state of Colorado, the Catholic Church has done a really good job. They've created a program through Marisol House, which is right next door to Planned Parenthood, where if you walk in there and you are counseled and you decide to keep your baby, you get a free sonogram, you're going to receive care for that child, not only up until you have the child, but the Catholic Church will provide housing, education, and food for you up until your child is 12 years old. And that's going to be better than anything that the government's going to provide for you, right? The government ultimately doesn't really care about you flourishing long-term in the building of a family. They want you to become a repeat customer to Planned Parenthood because there's money to be made there. So Christians have done a fantastic job, and you need to reject that lie that we don't care about children after they're born. Look at the fights we're having over education right now, right? Government-run education is so bad and is so driven about creating an agenda and creating activists, especially liberal activists, that you have parents and conservative parents stepping up all over, not only for their own children's sake, but because we care deeply about the future of all American children with regards to the education that they're receiving. So conservative Christians are engaged in all of these areas to provide a great future for people. And that's a future you're not going to get if you go into a Planned Parenthood clinic.
Yeah. Well, you raise a lot of points there. And what an amazing story there. Up through 12 years old. That is incredible. I had no idea that was going on. And I think that's part of the battle here too, is that so often the things that are happening aren't being talked about. They don't get attention in media. And so there's really this narrative out there that is not accurate, that all of these people who are pro-life don't care about anything other than stopping abortion, when that is just not at all the truth. The care is this is all based on a love for others, right? And living that out. And we're seeing people in the pro-life movement do that every day. So what is your prediction here? What do you think happens next in the midst of this uncertainty? Do you think they're going to wait to give this verdict, or do you think we're going to see it sooner?
That's the million-dollar question. We don't know what's going on in there. My sense from reading John Roberts' recent statements that they're going to take their time, but unfortunately, we're going to have to spend about 4 or 5 weeks speculating. But, this is law. They've got to get it right. And so I hope they're not rushed. But you asked what's going to happen. Here's the heartbreaking story that's going to happen in places like Colorado, Billy. They're going to end up with Planned Parenthoods right near the airport, where they'll be driving vans 24 hours a day as people come in to get an abortion. They're going to put vans right at the border of the state of Colorado where people can cross the border and have an abortion in a van. And then I was just talking with our friends, Save the Storks. They're expecting abortion vans to now be utilized similar to like an Uber Eats, where you just dial it up and it just shows up at your house. You get an abortion in your driveway. All of this on top of, the idea that the FDA may clear these abortion pills by mail, where you're not even talking to doctors anymore. So they're going to try to make getting an abortion, killing an innocent child, as easy as possible. They're going to drive to your house, do it in the driveway. They'll mail you the abortion pills. This not only harms the innocent children, this is going to harm the moms that are not seeking proper medical care. They're not having a doctor oversee these processes. So it's going to get a lot worse for women. We're going to see deaths. I think we'll see deaths as a result of this malpractice, not only of the innocent child in the womb, but of the mom. So we're going to see a lot more pain come out of this in states like Colorado and California. But we're not going to know for another 4 or 5 weeks. I think they've got to do their due diligence, take their time. But unfortunately, because of this leak, because of this break of norms that came from, we think, from a justice a clerk on the liberal side, you're going to have a lot of upheaval and possibly an effort to try to sway justices, which is not the role of the public. I mean, think about all of the consequences to this. That the Supreme Court was supposed to be a place where we debated these laws in a neutral place, responding to the intent of the law, not a place that's a de facto legislature. That's what we're going to have now, where you have outside influences trying to sway Supreme Court justices.
Yeah, it's a lot to consider. There's a lot going on, and I'm sure the story is just beginning. Jeff, thank you so much for joining us today. Really appreciate it.
Billy, thank you. God bless you. God bless all your followers and listeners.